So what we'll do, we'll crack on. Last Saturday's boxing match, we had Josh Kelly up for a European title. Lost quite comprehensively in 6 rounds. Looked very good to start off with. My question to you, Mart, obviously it's in a roundabout way about the fight. A lot of these boxers now, they seem to be getting pushed and pushed to have title fights. Kelly being one, he's 10 fights. 10 fights. You're learning the trade. You're being thrown in against, a wily professional who's, he's number 6, number 7 on a couple of the world councils. And he's been beaten comprehensively. He's only had 10 fights. Do you think that a lot of these boxers now are being pressurized and pushed into these big fights very early on, like say Conor Benn, and that's just 2 that come to mind, way before they should be?
Yeah, definitely. I would. It's interesting you said that, because I think it was the day before, actually, on the Friday night. Welsh lad called Gavin Gwynn came up against Sean McComb. That was for it was a Commonwealth title. I was calling it the British title all week, but I think it was actually the Commonwealth belt they fought for. And again, McComb, I think it was his 12th fight. He was 11-0 at this time. Massive, what's the word? Massive favourite with all the bookies. I think I actually picked Gavin to win on points. He got well, it was referee stoppage because McComb turned his back on him. The referee just waved it off. But I had him 5-1 to win on points, I think, and much more experience. Fought for the British and the Commonwealth title on 2 occasions, I think, as well. So I think a lot of the time, the hype does sometimes get the better of these young fighters, and especially when you're with a bigger promoter like 70K, isn't it? With McComb. I'm not too. Josh Kelly's with Matchroom, is it?
Yeah, I said there's only you've only.
So they're always going to get the hype behind them, aren't you? And it just.
And they start. You mentioned them too. They're starting off in the career 5-10 fights. Conor Benny's there obviously because of his name, because of his dad. And there's big talk. There was big talk before the fight of him fighting Josh Kelly if Josh Kelly was a European champion, and Ben's, I don't know how many fights he's had, but it's still you can count them on a couple of hands. 5-10, maybe slightly more. But he got dropped. He came back and won, but he got dropped. 2 or 3 fights ago. I think it was against the French guy. But I just can't. I know they're trying to hype up fighters. You can hype up a fighter, but you don't put them in with, ex-world contenders after you've had, there's the exception to the rule, like Lomachenko, who won a world title after 4 or 5 fights, and the second one and the third one and so on. But that's a different level. You've been to the Olympics, you've done well in the Olympics, you've had 10 fights, you've got your whole career ahead of you, and now there's potential of, Josh Kelly, he's got a good chance of a world title in the next 12 months, 18 months. I've looked at the rankings, and Josh Kelly now, he's lost, and you've got Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, Manny Pacquiao, Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Mickey Garcia in the top 15. Sorry, those are in the top 10. And there's I think Virgil Ortiz is fighting in a couple of weeks against Morris Hooker. They're 2 of the top 10, who I haven't even mentioned from one of the other divisions. So you're probably talking 15 or 20 guys there who've had 25 plus fights. A lot of them have hardly, most of them haven't even lost a fight. You've got a couple, obviously, Pacquiao and Porter, but some of those guys are 35-0 and 37-0.
Yeah.
You're talking about somebody who's had 10 fights. You hype somebody up to European level, and he's gone and lost at that level. You can't go talking about a world title fight in 12 or 18 months, especially that top 10 there is probably the strongest division of any division. They've all won world titles pretty much, apart from 2 people that I've never heard of. But it's just, I can't see what. Obviously, you can see what they're trying to do, to get him a bigger fight. But he hasn't ruined his career, but that's going to set his confidence back a lot.
Definitely, it's like that top 15 you just rattled off there, it's like murderer's row, and you want to protect one of your prime investments. You know, he's young, hungry fighter. His style as well, it's going to attract a lot of casual fans in as well with his movement, his footwork. I think pretty good looking chap as well, so you're going to get those sponsorship opportunities coming in.
Yeah.
It is just too much too soon. You see it a lot of times with young footballers. You see it a hell of a lot in mixed martial arts nowadays. A lot of sort of young fighters, especially in the UFC, they'll get a shot at a ranked guy way too early, or or say they'll be a kickboxer. They haven't really trained much, say sort of ground game with their wrestling or the jiu-jitsu. They'll get matched up against someone who can take them down. They're just out of the depth completely, and it's like, oh, okay, this guy we thought was going to be the next killer, the next John Jones, just he's completely beatable. We've just exposed him like that. I'm not saying Josh Kelly's been exposed at all, but
and some of those UFC fighters that you just mentioned have only had like 4 fights or 6 fights, and then the octagon on pay-per-view like 3rd or 4th down.
It's crazy.
They had 4 fights. It's just unreal.
Well, CM Punk as well, for example, he was I say a professional wrestler, as in WWE pro wrestling. I don't believe he wrestled in college or anything like that, but I think he had maybe a year or 2 years training, and he that was more of a publicity stunt, I think. But again, like, how can you get that how can that be a professionally sanctioned bout to begin with? What athletic commission or governing body is signing off on that fight happening? You've got to ask yourself that. Second of all, how delusional is the promoter? If you've got to be realistic with your stable of fighters, I think, and see, okay, this guy, he can be a decent journeyman. We can make a good bit of money off him on the way up, maybe, and you might sort of get to British title level, European title level, intercontinental level, but you'll sort of have an idea. I imagine I've never promoted the boxing fight. I've never bloody been in the boxing gym, so you have to imagine they sort of know where the fighters' limitations are going to be, and you don't. How do you pronounce his? Now I've been trying all weekend to pronounce Avanesyan, David Avanesyan. Sorry, that's that beat Josh Kelly. Avanesyan, like he's been champion for. Has he defended his belt a few times at this point? He's a 30-odd fight veteran. He's tough as all. He's one of those fighters that seems to not necessarily always start slow, but he always more comes into it. And against someone like Kelly, who's going to be, I don't know necessarily whether he had like an adrenaline dump after those first few rounds, sort of giving his everything, or it was a case of he's hitting this other lad with everything. It's sort of like maybe 80-90% of what he can throw, and it's not really making a dent in him. And maybe that just shot his confidence, and he was sort of getting beaten back. And
I think he rocked him. He definitely. I'm not sure which round it was, but after to me, it was a very similar to the hype and the performances of Amir Khan. You could guarantee that for 3 or 4 rounds, Amir Khan's quick hands were he's not gonna worry anybody because he didn't have the power, but he's gonna look really, really good for 3 or 4 rounds. Then he's gonna get caught, and that's the end of it. For obviously, his jaw wasn't the best, and he was taken out on numerous occasions when he stepped up the level. For me, this was kind of similar. Kelly was very, very sharp, very, very good for 3 or 4 rounds, looked great. But then one big punch from Avanesyan, and it's good night. Yes, he lasted a couple of extra rounds. He was clinging on for dear life, but the experienced fighter, he literally, as you said, he came at him for 6 rounds. His engine was of a European and a world class level. He just keeps coming. He was rocked badly, and then Kelly went in for the kill, but he kind of shook it off. And just kept coming. And in the end, as you said, I think he ran out of ideas. You can move and you can hit, but if you're hitting somebody and they just keep coming and they keep coming, like a Canelo, then, and this guy's lost 3 fights. So potentially you're talking about a guy that in 18 months' time is going to win a world championship, to losing against a guy that's lost three fights. He's 127 and he looked a decent fighter, and it's probably put him up the rankings. I think he's 10th in the WBO. he's not in the top 10 of the Ring magazine table. So, she's a decent level fighter, but, let's see, if he goes now and fights somebody in the top 10 and loses, well, then that really shows where Josh Kelly is,
Yeah, I think it's been quite a year for these sort of big underdog upsets. There was Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez.
Yeah.
That's a couple of months ago now, wasn't it? Was that last year? Actually, thinking about it,
Yeah,
a few months had just blown by. It was end of 2020, I think.
It's probably about 6 months ago. But then the only difference with that is, Lopez was, on the periphery of, world championship level.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not 100% on his record, but he's never lost. But I think he was like a 20+ fighter, and he'd fought people, whereas Kelly's fought nobody. And then within, on his 10th fight, he'd had 9 fights. He's fighting for a European, and as you said, you've got to be, if you've ever been a sports person of a decent level, just to be the best in your county at any sport, you're really good. When you become the best in your country, out of whatever it is in the UK, 60 million, or Avanesyan, or any of the Americans, if you're the top in your country, you're on top of the world in your mind. You're the best in your country. But then you come up against somebody else, and you no matter what sport or anywhere in life, somewhere at some point you're going to come up against somebody that's better than you. And if you've only had 10 fights, and if you're not at that level and you're thrust in, you're going to come up short.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know why they gave him the fight so soon, considering do you see his last fight with, was it Winston Campos? Really didn't look as sharp as I thought people were giving him credit for. I want to say he knocked him. Campos knocked Kelly down early on, but I'm not sure how true that is. So I did rewatch the fight back before the one over the weekend, but I've straight blank out my mind as per usual. But yeah, I think I don't want to say he's another one who's going to fall victim to the sort of Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, bit too much too soon, bit too much of a sort of name given, sort of donned to him by the media and the promoters, because he can easily bounce back from it. And I think a lot of the best champions do. I mean, look at Canelo. He had he had the Floyd fight way too early. And there was the fact that Floyd made him cut a fair bit of weight as well. Young, hungry guy who could knock my head off. Let's dehydrate him as much as possible that I could still fight at and have a bit better chance. Then look how Canelo's gone on since then. Apart from the controversial Triple G, should we call them robberies?
I do think the difference though with Canelo, because Canelo started his professional career when he was around 17, and he'd had about 30 fights before he fought Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
And I think he was only 23 years old when he fought Mayweather. Oh. So his head movement now in his last few world title fights is, he's on a different level. I think if he did fight Mayweather now, when Mayweather was at his peak, it would be. I'm not saying it would be a different story, but he was taken to school when he fought him when he was 23. Whereas now, after having another 20 fights, for me now, he's obviously the Golovkin fights, as you said, he should have lost them. But I think he's come on another level again since then. His last few fights, it's a who's who when you look at his resume of who he's fought in his last 10 fights.